Welcome to CNN 10. I'm Carl Azus. I'll be your host for the next 10 minutes of news. The first story we're explaining this Thursday involves lawsuits that could lead to changes in the U.S. real estate industry. And it's significant because that industry is very important to the U.S. economy. Here's what's happening. Several lawsuits have been filed in the United States. The suits accuse the National Association of Realtors, America's largest trade association, of illegally conspiring with other companies to keep fees higher than they should be when homes are bought and sold. The fees being debated are the commissions, the percentage of a home's sale price that realtors get. For decades, they've been hovering at around 6%.
When it comes time to find a new home, 87% of buyers will enlist the help of a real estate agent. That agent might search for listings or serve as the go-between for negotiations and draw up a sale contract. Ultimately, that agent will probably get about 3% of the sale price of the house. For a $500,000 house, that's $15,000, and the seller's agent will get another 3%. So here's the question. Would you pay that much money to real estate agents if you knew you had a choice? That question is at the heart of a class action lawsuit that's challenging the very basis on which the realtor profession rests, the 6% commission. Today, 50% of buyers find their new home online themselves, but many still use agents to close the deal. The lawsuit alleges that the National Association of Realtors, with its 1.3 million members, has colluded to keep commissions high by using something called the multiple listing service. The multiple listing service is like the original Zillow. It was born more than 100 years ago when local boards of real estate agents decided to file their listings to a central location and restrict access to licensed agents. Controlling all of that information meant they could charge high fees for their services. Eventually, in 1950, the Supreme Court ruled that realtors had engaged in an illegal price-fixing conspiracy. After that, realtors associations were careful not to make any official rules about what commissions had to be. But by then, the 6% commission was commonplace, and it hasn't changed much since.
So what does that 6% buy? Expertise. A buyer's agent can help shoppers find the right house, negotiate its price, and help with all the complexities of the home buying process. A listing agent can help sellers get the home on the multiple listing service so others can see it and negotiate the best price for the seller. But something has changed in recent years. More Americans are going online to do some of the legwork in finding a home they like. Some argue that because that can mean less work for real estate agents, those agents should receive smaller commissions than they have in decades past, resulting in less money in fees for buyers and sellers and more left in their pockets. Agents argue that without their guidance, Americans could make worse decisions when buying and selling and wind up paying in other ways down the road. It's not only the real estate industry that's been affected in the information age. Take the travel industry. With more people going to websites to book trips online, fewer are using travel agents. And the number of travel agencies in America has shrunk by almost 50% since the year 2000. We don't know yet if the new real estate lawsuits could lead to reduced fees in that industry and make it less desirable for realtors to work in. But that's why these cases are being so closely watched around the country. 10-second trivia. In 1934, the Federal Communications Commission replaced what organization? Wireless Telegraph and Signal Company, American Telegraph Company, Federal Radio Commission, or Pony Express? It was the Federal Radio Commission, which had become outdated, that the FCC replaced. Today, the independent U.S. government agency makes rules for all forms of mass communication, and it's considering a new plan that could reduce the amount of robocalls people get. If it's approved, it would take effect later this year, and what the new rule would do is allow telecommunications companies to automatically block certain robocalls from reaching your phone. Part of the reason why they haven't all done this yet is because they've had concerns about whether it would be legal. This FCC rule would officially say it is. Not all robocalls are fake or illegal. A dentist may use one to remind you of an appointment. A pharmacy may use one to say a prescription's ready. It's the unwanted robocalls, the spam or scam ones, that companies would be trying to stop.
In 2018, more than 47.8 billion robocalls were made in the U.S.
And it's only getting worse.
It's estimated that nearly half of all calls made to U.S. cell phones will be spam in 2019. So how do these calls actually work? To make the call, a phone isn't actually being used. A computer is. Robocalls are made using what's called Voice over Internet Protocol, or VoIP for short. It's the same technology used in popular apps like FaceTime and Skype, and it's important because no international phone bill means robocalls are incredibly cheap and easy to make. And while the computer generates a random number to call, it's also generating a false number to show up on your caller ID, disguising its identity, a process called spoofing. And with neighbor spoofing, the number on your caller ID is meant to look almost identical to yours to increase the likelihood that you pick up. But if you called that number back, your local pizza shop might answer instead, because these computers are often spoofing with real phone numbers. Now, according to the FCC, your best bet is to not answer calls from unknown numbers in the first place, since answering a robocall lets the computer know you might engage. In that case, get ready for even more robocalls now that you're on the hot list. You'll also be prompted to connect with an actual person who will either try to sell you a product, or worse yet, trick you into a scam.
To inform you that IRS is filing lawsuit against you.
Now, in the United States, the majority of these calls are illegal under the Telephone Consumer Protection Act. But because robocalls can originate from anywhere in the world, it's extremely difficult to enforce the law, though heavy fines have been slapped on robocallers in the past. In the meantime, phone companies are working on systems that more effectively identify and block illegal robocalls. But for now, robocallers will likely keep on calling you.
We have a bit of a space odyssey for 10 out of 10 today. People have always had a fascination with the sky, but ever since humans went from only looking up to actually going up, the impact has gone well beyond science. It's affected our culture. So get ready to blast off on a retrospective of space and its influences on society.
I am your father.
For decades, space has been the ultimate source material. From music,
ground control to Major Tom,
to science fiction,
Live long and prosper. Image of Sirac.
to video games.
Yeah. No way this is home.
But with the advent of NASA's man in space programs in the late 1950s, came unmistakably space-inspired architecture, pop culture, and trends.
Meet George Jetson.
But the astronauts do some things you do. In space, they drank Tang.
After astronaut John Glenn drank it in orbit, the powdered orange drink was launched into the public's consciousness, despite it having been on grocery shelves for 3 years.
Tastes great.
The space-age fashion trend of the 60s was popularized by designers like André Courrèges and Paco Rabanne. Rabanne memorably designing the costumes for the 1968 cult film Barbarella, starring Jane Fonda. Then there were the missions themselves, dramatized into bestsellers and onto the big screen.
The Eagle has landed.
This is Houston. Say again, please.
Houston, we have a problem.
While the real-life pictures of the Apollo astronauts inspired some of the most iconic cultural images that endure to this day.
To infinity and beyond!
Makes sense that any time a rocket man or woman steps into a pair of moon boots and jetsons off to a galaxy far, far away, it would be the right stuff to barber elevate the imagination up all over the place, generating the kind of buzz that goes light years beyand Andromeda, the known atlas, and making something oddity or alien come right down to Earth. I'm Carl Azus, making space for puns on CNN 10.